What ultimately I think finance leaders are looking for from a marketing leader is that sense that we treat our spend really wisely, almost as if it was our own money. And are we putting that money in the right place? And if so, fine. But what are the tough decisions to make? What perhaps can be left for a year? Where can we perhaps just dial it down a little bit to allow for other areas to be invested in as well? And I think, again, finance leaders want to see that we are good stewards of a financial budget and a good investor.
So today I am delighted to be joined by Jon Burke. This is a very special kind of different perspective episode. Jon is a seasoned marketing leader, and he's going to give us a kind of a different perspective than we usually get on 2 Cents Finance Talk. Thanks, Jon, for being here today. Can you introduce yourself to our audience a little bit? Maybe talk a little bit about your journey to your current position and what's kind of motivated you along it.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Anthony. Great to meet you. Thanks for making time to speak with me. So I've worked in marketing leadership positions for over 20 years across a number of industries. A number of them have been in permanent roles, but the last 6 or 7 years, I've been in consulting roles. One of the common themes, certainly in the last 10 or so years, is working closely with boards, working with finance leaders, CFOs, finance directors, and also in private equity space, working with investors and board oversight there. And really, I've put a lot of time and effort to frame marketing in ways that finance and non-marketing leaders can understand, so that they see it as a path to growth and investment and commercial business performance. So the last couple of years, really couple of great projects that I've worked on. I'll talk about those as we go through some of your questions. But it's been really helpful for me to frame our marketing activities in a way that financial leaders can really, really understand.
Yeah, that's really, really interesting to hear about. Let's sort of tackle the subject head on then.
Please.
Let's talk about this historic sort of disconnect. Where does it come from? Where do you see the kind of the biggest kind of rifts coming from between marketing teams and finance leaders?
Yeah, good. I think rift's probably potentially too strong a word. I would use the term misunderstanding. And certainly my experience when talking to finance leaders is when they fully understand what marketing are working on, what they can deliver, then there's a lot of scope then for working together and exploring opportunities for further investment. And the key for me is for finance leaders to see marketing as an investment, not a cost. It's very easy in tough times, financial challenges, for them to, let's say, look at marketing and put a pen through certain activities, and for marketing to have to justify its expenditure almost line by line. A very common theme is, for example, why do we attend so many events, and why do we spend so much money on Google, pay per click, and investing in SEO, that sort of activity. So it's really helpful to me when I speak to finance leaders to talk about, instead of running campaigns or digital activities or that sort of thing, is to talk about what we did in the light of our financial performance. So, for example, qualified inquiries, going through the pipeline, the value of those inquiries, what they look like, where they've come from. Appreciate that attribution is not always easy, but if we put marketing in the mix and show that, there's a combination of across the customer journey, online activity, web page visits, event attendance, downloads of brochures, watchings of videos, that sort of thing. You put that into the mix, you can see how contacts are coming into the pipeline. And then what we're looking to do is demonstrate to the finance team that we then convert that into measurable business that has an immediate revenue impact, but also in the future, long-term customer value as well. So what we like to frame, instead of focusing on vanity metrics like page views, clicks, Google rankings, that sort of thing, all of which are very good, but they underpin, for me, the bigger metric, which is the cost of acquiring a customer, what it costs us to acquire a customer or even to keep a customer. And then alongside that, the lifetime value of those customers. Are they transactional, or is the recurring revenue on the back of that? Is the relationship that can then be explored for growth, cross-sell, upsell, etc. And then as you build the story, if you're in an organization where there's growth through acquisition as well as organic growth, then those key customers, perhaps in the trend that you're showing, can become part of the acquisition story as well. So there's lots of different elements to that. Something else I'd also talk about is marketing in the round. So we're not just a marketing team in the business that spends or invests money in activities, but we have a marketing support through agencies, and we also have a tech stack. And if you spend time on the financial leadership to present marketing in the round and how it then works with, let's say, sales to get qualified leads in that they can then close, through to, let's say, if you're in an organization that sells products or widgets, the impact that then has on product going through the system, working capital, all of that. Finance really see that marketing have a role to play, and the finance understand what marketing's impact is.
Yeah, definitely. So I suppose the way you're framing it, then it's moving away from vanity metrics, or the appearance of vanity metrics anyway, and showing what the real impact is of your metrics in a way.
Yes. Yeah, totally. So, for example, we all understand that it costs money to win new business, and it costs money to keep that business as well. And that's not just in marketing activity, that's also in the sales teams as well, and commercial, or maybe customer success support teams, that sort of thing. What we're looking to do is not necessarily, and I think this is key, we're not necessarily looking to drive down the cost of customer acquisition. What we're looking to do is measure the cost of acquisition, measure the value that customers have over the lifetime, and look at the ratio between the two. And we want to grow that ratio. So, if, for example, one company I worked with as a consultant, I inherited, I think the ratio was about 3.6, 3.5. But over time, we got that to 4.2. And that ratio is the ratio of the lifetime value of the customer over the cost of customer acquisition. So if we can show it's growing, i.e., the pace at which lifetime value grows faster than any increases in customer acquisition cost, then that's a real benefit to the business. Ultimately, of course, we want to have economies of scale. We want to be efficient, and we want to bring that customer acquisition cost down a bit. But if we can grow that ratio, that's always good. And we measure that on a quarterly basis. I mean, I report it. Sorry, I measure it monthly and I report it quarterly. And you can kind of see the trend. We look at what's kind of going on in the macro environment, that sort of thing. We also look at the cost for the revenue pipeline per pound of marketing spend. So, for example, at a previous client, we did a £150,000 campaign to launch a new service, and it generated over £5 million in new business, £9 million in inquiries. So those kind of metrics, finance like to hear, and then you're comparing, similar campaigns as well. But alongside that, we're also doing brand building campaigns as well, so people are aware of us. Another thing we like to talk about in finance conversations is the fact that not all of our customers are in market at any one time. Studies have shown that 5% or 1 in 20 of your target audience will actually be in a buying mode at that particular time. It's not always clear as to what that 5% are. So this is where it's really important that we have strong brand awareness campaigns. But alongside that, we want to have activation campaigns that drives a decision amongst that 5%. And if I've worked in previous companies where a buying cycle might be 3 or 4 years. So you know that all of the market will go through a decision-making process at some point in a 4-year cycle. So you want to make sure your campaigns hold up over that period of time, and that they're well invested in. And again, when you present that finance data to the finance team, it really kind of holds water, and it helps them in their investment the thesis to their boards and owners as well.
Great, that's great. I think you've basically answered questions 2 and 3 there. So I think we
You
can
know,
move on to 4. I think we'd just be
brilliant.
repeating ourselves if I asked you those ones. So I'll move on. If you were advising a CFO then who wants kind of clearer visibility into marketing impact, what are the first questions that they should be asking a CMO or a marketing leader?
Oh, that's an excellent question. So, what I'd like to kind of understand from the finance team is what their key priorities are. So, as well as thinking about the growth of the business, of course, but
Mm.
there might be some underlying issues, like, for example, I've worked with companies that make products, physical products instead of digital services, and they have got issues with shifting stock in a particular product range. There are areas where they want to grow investment and they want to make sure that they get some working capital up. Once we kind of understand some of the more pertinent issues that finance have, we can shape our marketing activities alongside that without doing any damage to the commercial imperatives of the business. Um, Another one we are often asked by finance leaders is, if we were to cut back or reinvest marketing, what would we do differently? So that's another one that we kind of look at. And again, we take a step back and sometimes say, you know what, let's get a blank sheet of paper and let's look at what marketing could be doing in the next 12 to 18 months if everything else was equal. And again, that's a really strong conversation to be had with finance leaders. What ultimately I think finance leaders are looking for from a marketing leader is that sense that we treat our spend really wisely, almost as if it was our own money. And are we putting that money in the right place? And if so, fine. But what are the tough decisions to make? What perhaps can be left for a year? Where can we perhaps just dial it down a little bit to allow for other areas to be invested in as well? And I think again, finance leaders want to see that we are good stewards of a financial budget and a good investor.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's just being mindful, I suppose, is that you are part of a business that's the overall goal really is to drive growth and revenue, right? You know, that's I suppose the what it boils down to ultimately, doesn't it? If you can speak that language, then you can talk to finance leaders. I expect, you know. Yeah, definitely. Okay, so let's talk about retention then. So, customer retention is often seen as a marketing metric, but it has huge financial implications as well. Can we dig a little bit deeper into that? Like, what would you have to say about that?
All good. So I would say I think retention is often treated as a nice to have. We're obviously, constantly looking for new business, but if we can keep an eye on the customers we've got, first of all, make sure that we maintain excellent service levels to take away any excuse they might have to look elsewhere. But what can we do to grow that business? Are there services or products we can cross and upsell? Are there opportunities for expansion? Maybe one of our customers or a couple of key customers is on an acquisition spree and they're bringing new companies into their portfolio. That's an enlarged customer base for us. We're looking at ultimately underpinning the financial model by growing existing business while attracting new business as well. Potentially, there's a recurring revenue model that's in the mix as well. And anything marketing can do to help explore that, to grow and make it easy for customers to do business with us, I think is really, really helpful. Um, I've worked with various companies that have either a transactional model or a long-term investment model. Let's say we've won a tender with a customer for multi-years at multi-million pound revenue. That's great, but what we want to do is by the time we get to the point where that tender is up for renewal, we've delivered such good service, not only at the sales level, but in the marketing communications and ABM model, that it's really difficult for them to decide to go and switch elsewhere. Whereas in a transactional model, you really want to be easy to do business with. You want to provide products and service in a timely manner, again, to take away any potential risk that a customer might go elsewhere.
Yeah, definitely. I think it's very holistic answer. There's a lot of variation then, I suppose, in that regard.
Well, yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like to think so.
Yeah, yeah. Definitely. Okay, so let's talk about let's go back to the kind of disconnect then. So what people get wrong about finance, where you've seen sort of people these misunderstandings happen. From your experience, where do marketing teams often struggle with sort of communicating with finance, communicating value to finance in particular? Where have you seen it kind of go wrong?
Okay, yeah, let's take it back a step. So, I think a really common mistake from a marketing leadership point of view when talking to finance is leading with channels and tactics rather than strategy and economics. So, a common question might be in the wake of any queries about budget spend is we need to invest more money in events. There's a couple of really big events in America. Our competitors are going to be there, our customers are going to be there, and we need a presence. But that might cost, tens of thousands, maybe even six figures. I think the way to actually better frame that is this is what we want to be doing, and here's how this changes our business. It will positively our cost of customer acquisition. There's great opportunities to improve lifetime value for the customer, and also for us as a business, it might improve our payback profile as well. If we can frame the conversation with finance in those terms and back that up by solid data and research, looking at knowing for sure who's going to be there, for example, what opportunities it opens up perhaps in the future as well, with the overall business strategy in mind, then I think that's really, really helpful. Again, thinking about strategy, how does our marketing strategy align with the overall strategy of the business? If we can make sure that we're in alignment, I think that's a really, really good position to be as well. Don't present too many metrics. I've seen so many marketing decks at senior management or board level where there's just metric after metric after metric. And again, I talked earlier about vanity metrics. Try and identify the must-have metrics. We talked about cost of acquisition, lifetime value. If there are other digital specific metrics or other, pipeline metrics that we want to include, then fine. But let's be consistent about that, and let's be clear about what value those metrics add to the overall commercial impact of the business. I think we should also at times be honest about what doesn't work. It's great to present to the board about all of our great plans, what we've achieved, and what we want to do in the next 12 to 18 months. But you know what? From a credibility point of view, let's just be honest and say, we tried this, that didn't work. If I get my time again, this is what I would do differently. I think we all live in a world where we can be realistic. We can accept that not everything goes according to plan. And let's just treat that as a learning curve. And I think you will get much better kind of credibility at board level if you can bring that to the table and say, the next opportunity I've got, this is where I would invest that resource in the future that's different. Another good thing to do is educate the leaders. Finance leaders don't fully understand marketing. I've heard it turned in all phrases, including, let's say, the colouring in department. And of course, in my view, no, I know, right? Yeah, totally. But for me, I know, but it's a challenge. That for me is an education piece. That is a great opportunity for me to sit down with a finance leader and say, well, actually, this is the value marketing brings to this business and will, in my view, bring in the next 12 to 18 months. These are our plans. These are the resources we have at our disposal. And this is what we do with them to enable us to grow our business, increase market share, improve our presence compared to our competitors. And on that point, don't be afraid to share what you're doing better than the competition and where perhaps you think there is room for growth in alignment with the competition. And so with all of that in mind, in the finance audience, these are the things they should be challenging the marketing teams on, in my opinion, to up the communication, to make sure that marketing are better engaged with finance and the other senior leaders, and so that everybody's on the same page in terms of what marketing really can deliver. And if it's not something marketing is delivering at the moment, then look to do that over the coming months and maybe next financial year.
Do you feel, John, it's a bit of a bonus question, but I guess when you're talking about the colouring in department, obviously it's a good joke, but I think it's because it's probably historically come from the fact that a lot of creative people end up in marketing, don't they? Or a lot of people on the kind of liberal arts side. I actually, I went to university and did English, and it's amazing to me when I look up these people, how many of them actually ended up in marketing. Makes sense, doesn't it? Like people who are good with words, good with language, creative people. It's obviously it's a function that has to tap into like a lot of human emotions in order to work successfully, doesn't it? You have to be able to influence people. Ultimately, you're in the business of influencing people. So I was wondering, like, how do you feel as somebody who's been a kind of veteran of this for 20 years? How do you feel about like the kind of the move to being like, very kind of data led, very kind of, do you feel like it's that there's a tension there, or do you feel like not at all, or do you feel like that they go hand in hand? You've been able to, it's fully it's augmented creativity in marketing departments, or what do you think?
I mean, you read my mind there when you just mentioned about data as well. So creativity is definitely a key component in the marketing mix for sure. You've got to be able to be creative about getting a message across that will resonate with customers and win business. And we do that, of course, using various different channels and tactics. My daughter's just graduated studying psychology at university. And funnily enough, I had this conversation with her. I said, a career in marketing awaits for you, because there is a psychological element to it. If we can understand the psychology of the customer, we can win. And if we do that better than our competitors in how we deliver that, then, that should really help us in the business. But you've touched on, for me, what is a piece of gold, in that we've got to be good at measuring and understanding data and what that data is telling us. So if you, for example, you do an NPS survey followed by the feedback that comes, and you analyze that, what is that data telling you? put away any kind of confirmation bias we might have. Let's be really clear on over a period of time measuring trends. What is our market looking like? What are we doing right? Where is the opportunity for improvement? And then feed that back into the business. I'm very passionate about marketing, as I'm sure you can tell, but I'm also passionate about being the voice of the customer. Let's be really clear on what the customer is saying to us through the data that we get, and that can come in so many different metrics. But let's present that in a way that's credible to the board, actionable, and then that we can measure in future um, the impact of what I call the promise to the customer. The promise of, now that we know all this information, what are we going to do? And let's measure that and report on that over time. So, and then the other side of that, of course, is a really good marketing leader understands the P&L, the finance. Very early on in my career, I joined the company, and within my induction phase, the CEO was very kind to give me a couple of hours and literally take me through a monthly board report. And for me, that was such a massive learning curve. What are the dynamics and what are the key components of that P&L that are going to potentially keep the CEO or the CFO awake the night before a board meeting? And how can I, as a marketing leader, help contribute to that to make them feel a bit better and a bit more of a comfort blanket that marketing is helping support that both within the business, but also getting business in as well. And I think if CFOs and CEOs can see that marketing have that attitude and that responsibility and understanding of finances, then all to the better.
Yeah, we talk a lot as well. You mentioned about how, I guess maybe you can go too much the other way where it's kind of metrics without meaning, right? Or metrics with numbers without a story behind them. That's the thing we've had many guests talk about actually on this podcast is you're presenting figures to a board, but what do they actually mean? What's the story that you're telling? And I suppose for people in marketing, that's a prime opportunity because you guys are good at telling stories, so at least you should be, right? Like that's kind of again your bread and butter. So it's again, so it's showing people like this is where we are, where we could get to potentially in the future, maybe as well, or where we have been as well. I think the two aren't mutually exclusive, are they? I think in terms of how you translate metrics, storytelling, creativity is maybe a big part of that. Would you agree?
Yes, definitely. I mean, it's important to tell the story outside of the business in terms of, again, as I said earlier, why should a customer do business with us? And we talk about, story of the brand, the story of the product, and we do that in a really compelling way, again, using all the tools at our disposal. But a finance leader once taught me a really good uh, uh, kind of fact about or kind of guidance about when it comes to valuing a business, which is very much a financial tool, and particularly if you're going to buy that business, let's say you're in an M&A phase and you're valuing a business, storytelling is important there as well because you're trying to tell the story about, let's say, the growth of the business, the way in which that business has gone from one phase to another, how they invest, what they do differently. There's a financial story to tell there as well. And again, if marketing can understand that and be engaged with the finance team in that respect as well, then again, more credibility, more sense that marketing and finance are working together, and it just eases that tension that there might be.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And that brings us on nicely actually to we're talking again about CFOs, CMOs or marketing leaders as strategic partners. Can you give me a kind of like, I guess, blue sky, perfect case scenario of what that would look like in your case, or maybe you've seen it happen. Like if it like what does it look like when finance and marketing are just in perfect synergy?
Okay, well, if I take it from the point of view that I've just come into a business, maybe I'm working on a contracting project. Um, I try and understand what the status quo is, where marketing have been, and what journey they've been on with the business. Sit down with the CFO and tell that story. Be really clear on kind of where marketing sits at the moment, but also where the business sits and how marketing has contributed to that. So things like market share, revenue growth. We talked about customers. What's the pipeline looking like? And how has marketing contributed to that pipeline growth? Be really honest about it. What can marketing do better? What's the real strength? And then set a vision together with what the next 12 to 18, 24 months looks like. And how is the marketing team well positioned for that at the moment? What extra resource do we need to deliver that? but build the business case. What impact will that have on the business over the coming 12 to 24 months when we initiate that kind of investment cycle? So work together to set growth and efficiency targets. Look at marketing in the round with sales teams as well in terms of the investment. We're not just talking about people, but we're talking about tools, technology, external agency resource as well. And how is that all contributing to the growth levers that the business has from a financial point of view? Um, and be clear on what I would call the must-have approach. What are the elements of our marketing activities that are absolutely fundamental? So usually, for example, a website and your Google activity, because we all know that customers will at some point go on Google or other search engines to find you, or maybe even find your competitors. And again, you want to position yourself there. But also, do we have to attend the 14 events we attended last year? Could we attend 10 or 12, but do them a bit better? And be a bit more compelling in those events. And from a marketing point of view, let's be perhaps a little bit critical in our thinking in what we do going forward.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's just a really good lesson to live by. We have to touch on it, John, because it's dominating so much of the conversation. I'm going to talk about AI a little bit.
Okay.
There's a lot of opinions, and I know everyone's a little bit burnt out with it, but I think it's actually very relevant to what we're talking about today, because we're
Yes.
talking about communication through metrics, through numbers. Have you seen? Do you think that AI presents us with a key opportunity here? Or do you see it as being, a bit of a hindrance, maybe holding people back a little bit? I just want to get your perspective on AI actually in general, but in particular on this, what we're talking about today as well. What do you think?
So, yeah, great question. I think AI is an excellent kind of enabler and productivity tool. I love it. It's got its place, but there are certain things that um, I would wanna make sure there's a human augmentation to it. So let me give you an example. About 2 years ago, I was working for a drug discovery company, and we wanted to do a series of blogs on trends in cancer drug development. And we didn't wanna just do one blog, we wanted to do about 2 or 3 and support that with uh, um, videos, etc. So I've got no scientific knowledge of any real detail, and I was talking to PhDs, and so I put a series of prompts into a AI tool, and it came up with, I have to say, a really, really good blog, and I showed that to one of the team leaders in the business, and they were like, "This is amazing. Who wrote this?" But it does need tweaking in certain areas. So I obviously told him that it came from an AI tool, but what was really apparent was it had got us to 90% of the finished product. So it took us from a blank sheet of paper in a matter of minutes to something that was 90% ready, but we needed to then hone it and get it over the line and just give it some tweaks that made it relevant, and also double check some of the data that AI was reliant on in its resourcing. So that's one example of how AI essentially is a time saving tool. What I then kind of extrapolate from that is I've got all of these resources at my disposal in terms of team, people in the marketing team. What I want them to do is be really savvy in how they use AI so that they can be better at doing some of the tougher work that might take a bit more time, um, and perhaps require a bit more strategic thinking, and also think outside the box in terms of where we go as a business going forward from a marketing point of view. So AI helps in that. What I am a bit concerned about with regards to AI is an over reliance on AI. So another good example in a previous client was in the last 12 months. We wanted to get a new product to market. So I wanted to produce a go to market plan, and I asked a couple of people in the team to work on that. When they delivered that GTM plan, it was very clear they'd used AI, and it wasn't very good. Okay. It's what we call now work slop. They've produced products from AI, passed it off as their own, and it's sloppy. Work slop. New term for you there if you didn't already know it. So we've got to be really clear that AI has its place, but there's nothing better than a fully qualified marketeer to actually provide something that is of detailed, good enough quality. And I would say the same about finance leaders as well. You've got all these qualifications, AQA, ACCA, your Chartered Institute Management Accountant. Don't let AI produce sloppy output. Stick to what you've been taught. and what you've delivered and what you know to be good, but let AI get you over the line for some of the stuff that perhaps is less risky. And that is my 10 pence worth when it comes to AI.
Surely as well, I would think, in terms of like, if you're somebody who is in marketing, and like I was saying, is very good at the kind of strategic creative side of it, maybe, but maybe numbers aren't your thing. Maybe numbers give you a headache. I think it gives you, there's an opportunity there, isn't there, with sort of, analyzing data. I think it's
Oh,
fantastic for things
definitely.
like that.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
absolutely. But again, so if you're going to ask AI to give you some analysis and some data, make
Mm.
sure that you know that data well enough to be able to say if AI's got it wrong. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. Sure.
I'll give you a very good analogy. A company, and I'm not going to give it too much away about this company, but they did a TV campaign, and um, you could tell it had been AI generated because the prompt that had led to the AI campaign was playing in the background of the TV advert over like a radio jingle or something. Someone had put in the prompt, obviously, have some music playing in the background. But that music, the lyric to that music was the AI prompt that had been put in to generate the advert. So
Right.
again,
Yeah.
human augmented AI works great, but you've got to have that human touch that just sensitizes it and makes sure that there's no own goals like that.
Definitely. Yeah. Definitely. Especially in a function like you're in marketing, it's, where in many ways you are the face that's being presented to the world of a company on the global stage. I mean, where there have been some real embarrassments, haven't there? Like, Coca-Cola was another one. There was a Coca-Cola Christmas ad that like got absolutely raked over the coals on social media because it was just so clearly all AI generated. Yeah, which that's Coca-Cola. I mean, you, I know, I mean, seriously.
Yeah, and thankfully, Coca-Cola in a position where they can outspend that activity and make sure that it's something people forget about over the time. But the question I would ask is, do I want to put my brand at risk by having AI kind of allow me to do that? So yes, I'm very cautious about what we output on the back of AI.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's really good. Okay, we are coming to a close. I just wanted to know. I've skipped over a few questions, John, because I felt like you were answering a lot of them anyway, and I didn't want to just be repeating myself, like and just for the sake of it. But is there anything that we haven't touched on that you'd like to talk about a little bit before we do like wrap ups?
Yeah, I'm gonna finish by saying, I think whichever department you work in, marketing, finance, or make sure you always put the customer at the heart of what you do. From a marketing point of view, I like to believe that we can embed the voice of the customer within the business. Um, and so again, data-led approach, but be really mindful of who your customers are. We focus on something in marketing called personas. So we almost like we flesh out what a customer is, what their desires are, what their pain points are, and we talk about how our marketing activity can frame around that as part of what we do going forward in our marketing strategy. We should be talking about that internally in the business as well. Who are our customers? Are there We have a core customer base, I guess, but are there inadvertently other customers we are bringing into the business because they're buying a product that might be a solution for something we haven't actually built the product for in the first place? So let's be as a business, from a marketing point of view, let's share insights across the business because that's something we can all win from. But let's be mindful that the decisions we make at some point could potentially impact the customer either positively or negatively. And so I'm always mindful of who the customer are and that any decisions we make. Somebody once told me about having like an empty chair at a desk in a meeting room. If you have a meeting room, keep a chair empty for the customer so that you are mindful of them. I think it was Steve Jobs at Apple, but just be really mindful that as a business, when we talk, we should have the customer in mind.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's everyone's business, isn't it? There's no one who's immune to it. And I think if you look at the
Mm.
finance side, a lot of people who've been guests on the podcast have said, we've been seen in the past as being like, I don't know, like the kind of backroom number crunchers a little bit, like as if we're completely separate from everything else. And,
Mm.
because we're not necessarily customer facing. But I mean, it's everyone's business, isn't it? Of course it is. It
Yeah,
makes perfect
definitely.
sense.
And I think on that point, I mean, it is worth always looking to see if we can be more financially more efficient. Absolutely, I've got no problem with that at all. But let's not do that at the sacrifice of customer performance to the customer. If there are improvements we make and we are more financially efficient, the customer should see the benefit of that, not the cost of it.
a fantastic way of putting it, John. Thanks, honestly. I want to ask you one more question, which is just a kind of fun. We're doing this thing at the Alliance where we want to do a compilation of people just talking about kind of their professional pet peeves.
Mm.
Okay, so in his word, I wonder if you could just have a little think for me, John, and could you give me like your professional pet peeve, whether it's like people canceling meetings like 5 minutes before, people calling meetings when it's like it literally could be communicated in a Slack message, or maybe something different, whatever you have. Do you have a peeve, professionally speaking?
So, seeing as you mentioned the M word, meetings, let's focus on that. So, I once worked at a business where so you've got like 1 hour blocks and 30-minute blocks in Outlook or whichever calendar you might use. The owner of that business said you can only book meetings in 25 or 50-minute increments. And the genius of that was that if you had like back-to-back meetings, you always had either a 5-minute or 10-minute gap in between to catch up on any admin, or get rid of a few emails, or actually get from one meeting to another. So there's genius there, but also what that then did was encourage people to put away your inbox, close your inbox in a meeting so you're not distracted, and then you've got that 5 or 10 minutes at the end of a meeting to look at any emails you might have to follow up on. So keep meetings to 25 or 50-minute increments, not 30 or 60 minutes. Then the other bit was, and the other thing I find is a true pet peeve is if your meeting finishes at, say, the 20-minute mark, don't talk for another 5 minutes to just fill out the time. Thank everyone for their time. Move on, because time is a precious commodity. And we all have the same amount of it. So let's manage it wisely. Okay. Some companies have more money than the other, but you all have the same amount of time. So if you're in a meeting, again, another one will be having meetings for meeting's sake, but that's another conversation. But if you're having a meeting, make good use of the time. And if you've got 5 minutes at the end, end the meeting, move on. I think
Yeah,
everyone
I've been in many kind of business meetings where like it's so clear that everyone wants to leave the meeting and no one has anything left to say, but everyone's too polite to
Yep.
say, "Can we end this now?"
Where?
And it's one of those situations. And what it takes is literally for someone to just be blunt enough to be like, "Guys, I actually do have a lot to do today. Can we please end this meeting now?
What?
Unless there's anything else that's urgent, can we please?" But I think I think sometimes you need to, the person who's hosting the meeting needs to take charge there, don't
Yeah.
they? And be like, okay, no, we've actually been through the agenda. This is the end. But
Yeah.
thanks for that, John. That was a really constructive answer as well. It wasn't
That's
just a
okay.
moan. You
That's
actually
all right.
provided a solution to it
Yes.
as well, which was really cool. So that was
One
a
of my
great
best.
answer. Thanks so
Thanks.
much.
I mean, just
Um,
on this point, it's always worth checking to see, are the meetings we hold on a regular basis, are they all necessary? Sometimes there are other meetings that can encapsulate other meetings, and let's just fold them in. But yeah, happy to help and be positive on that.
Definitely. John, thanks so much for your time today. It's been great chatting with you. If people want to reach out to you, talk more, find out more about the subject, where should they go?
I guess LinkedIn's a great place for us all. We all spend some time on LinkedIn, I guess. So you'll find me there. Jon P. Burke is my kind of handle after LinkedIn. But yeah, if you search for me, you shouldn't have to go far to find me.
Thanks so much, John.
And that wraps up another episode of the 2 Cents podcast. Thank you to our listeners for taking the time to tune in. If you enjoyed this episode and want to hear from more finance leaders like today's guest, please subscribe to the show and leave a rating or review in your favourite podcast app. It would mean so much to me and my guests if you can show them some love and appreciation for sharing so many great insights with us on the show. Again, thanks for listening. See you in the next one.